ABC24 This Week starts right now.
Hello, and thank you for watching ABC24 This Week. I am your host, Pepper Baker, and this episode is special. As you can see, no panelists, just you and me going through the best moments from this show's 3 most talked about topics this year. So, taking the first segment is arguably the biggest story of the year for Memphis, the National Guard deployment and the Memphis Safe Task Force. Well, the Memphis Safe Task Force dominated our first segment of almost every show back when it started as a rumor, even before Mayor Paul Young officially announced the task force's operations began in Memphis on September 29th. Then the National Guard deployment eventually followed 2 weeks later in October. Our first panel discussing federal occupation in Memphis was on August 24th, when Tennessee Governor Bill Lee and Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves sent troops to assist the deployment in Washington, D.C., and President Trump had eyes on sending troops to Memphis next. Now, our panelists that episode were MLK 50 reporter Catherine Burgess, former Memphis City Schools board member and city councilwoman Tawan Stout Mitchell, and of course, ABC24 political analyst Otis Sanford, who I always like to have lead off our discussion.
Governor Bill Lee and Governor Tate Reeves are just kowtowing to the president, and they will say, anything you want, Mr. President, we're willing to do. We'll send them to D.C., we will send them to the border, we'll send them to Halifax if you want. And that's not real leadership here. I'm sure that Republicans, the colleagues that you mentioned across the aisle, Tawan, like a Brent Taylor, for example, will say this is a good thing, because he's been harping on crime in Memphis all along and making Memphis matter with fighting crime. So I'm sure he likes that. But the fact is, this is not needed. What Kash Patel said back in May was not true. We were not the homicide capital. You should have known that. And so this is just raw politics. I think Antonio Parkinson is right. This is a power move, raw politics. Retribution is a good term for it. And we just have go along to get along governors who are willing to do anything possible to appease this president.
People in Memphis and Shelby County may not understand exactly what this looks like. So break it down a little bit for viewers. What differences could Memphians see if National Guard troops were on our streets?
Well, I wish I knew what it would look like, because I don't understand why they're going to D.C. I don't understand what exactly they're doing in D.C. I don't understand why now they're carrying firearms. D.C. isn't even in the top 30 cities for crime, for violent crime. So I don't know what they're doing there. So that doesn't lend me a lot of information to know what they would do if they came here. I do think I can say that if they came here, if we had National Guard troops from perhaps different states coming to Memphis, sent by the president, that would very much be an undermining of local authority. You wouldn't get your Memphis City Council people, your Memphis mayor, your Shelby County commissioners, probably even your state legislators. None of those people would be able to direct these entities coming into our city, and that's what we're seeing right now in D.C.
Now, of course, that was back before we knew what we know now. Now, the Memphis Safe Task Force topic also brought the biggest debate to the show this year. It was one of the first times we brought former Memphis City Council Chair and Shelby County Schools Board member Scott McCormick to the show on October 5th. He ended up going toe-to-toe with First Baptist Church Broad Pastor Keith Norman after White House officials visited Memphis for the first time since the task force operations started.
Well, the facts are we are one of the worst, if not the worst city in America when it comes to crime. And crime has been a problem for the last 20 years, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's time that we do something different, that we bring in resources to tackle this issue.
You say resources. I think you were in a position to do that twice in your career. The divestments that have taken place in the city of Memphis, from Memphis and in another area where you served in education, do not reflect that all of a sudden we want to invest. It shows that we took money away.
I didn't take any money away. I wasn't a part of taking money away. I supported the police department, and in education, I supported the efforts that we had.
Where we are now is as a result of divesting in this city for years, leading to the poverty and leading to the long-term systemic issues that we have. For the governor to come and say, here's $100 million, that was like saying, we know we haven't invested. But we don't even know what we're going to do with that money.
State. That's not positions that I held. And how can you say we're de-investing? When I was on the council now 20 years ago, our city budget was $380 million, and now it's $850, almost $900 million. We've been growing, and the city grows, and but I did not.
The budget is based on tax returns and tax dollars.
You got to let him finish because we give you your time.
Yeah.
I did not participate in defunding of the city. I encouraged investment in the city. I may have questioned some of the priorities of where we were spending money, and I was always in favor of backing the police department and giving them all the resources that we need. And when I was there, we were at a full complement of police officers.
I think that's when you all cut the pension.
What does it mean?
I was not there when I cut.
Otis got to finish this.
I just want to ask succinctly, what does it mean to say less cops be cops? What does that mean to you?
What it means to me is, and a lot of things that I've seen on social media, when officers are trying to arrest people and they're being attacked by citizens, and I haven't seen it here locally.
That is not happening.
No.
That is not happening.
Okay. Let cops be cops too. I have seen locally here where these guys in their cars doing donuts. I saw one at Union and Pauling. And wait a minute. You're not letting me.
Last word, because we have so much to do.
But the cops don't even bother to respond to that because they know that they're not being supported.
Okay. On that note, wow, great first segment. And perhaps in second place for the biggest debate this year was between Susan Thorpe of Thorpe Communications and Shelby County Republican Party Vice Chair Luke Simbel on our November 17th show discussing immigrants affected by the Memphis Safe Task Force arrests.
Can we talk about Native Memphians' humanity? Can we talk about what mass low-skilled migration does to our community's most vulnerable population here, the majority of whom are black? They are suddenly having to compete against jobs with lower wages because we have an influx of cheap labor. They are having to compete against increased housing costs, increased costs to services. One of the examples you gave was a homeless illegal alien. Well, why do we have homeless illegal aliens on our streets when they shouldn't be here in the first place? So if we want to talk about humanity, what I would like to focus on is the humanity towards our lawful residents, those who are born here, those who are here legally, and our most vulnerable populations. It is unfair for them to have this many illegal aliens on our streets.
Could you explain to me briefly how people who are not committing any crimes, who are not vandalizing, aren't driving while drunk, aren't assaulting people, they just are here for unlawful presence, and they're working, how is treating them as subhuman beings? Wait a minute, how is that restoring order? Don't tell me that it's about the people here in Memphis. We're talking about people who came here, some quite desperate, but most are working, most are have families, most are contributing positively to the community, and they're snatched off the street and they're thrown into detention, they're arrested from their children. I mean, it is, the way this is being handled is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. It is against everything that we as decent human beings, as a civilized society, should accept.
I don't think there's anything civil about making our community's most vulnerable residents compete against people who shouldn't be here in the first place for housing and for jobs. We know that wages are lowered when there is an influx of labor.
Where are you getting this for competing for? Where are you getting this for competing for housing? What are you talking about?
Costs in neighborhoods that used to be primarily blue-collar workers, that used to be primarily black communities, that are now primarily Latino communities, and we know that there is a large percentage of illegal aliens living in those communities. That is not humane. And so what I want to focus on are the Memphians here. Let's focus, we have poor Memphians that we can be helping, and we don't need those services and that money going to people who should not be here in the first place.
Otis,
well,
you got a louder voice than me.
Well, the only thing I want to say about that is Republicans have to go a long way to try to prove that they care about Memphians. That's just
we're cleaning up the crime in our city. Look at the Memphis Safe Task Force.
Yeah, okay.
There's no
Well, a bit of a mic drop moment there by Otis, but the Memphis Safe Task Force is the story that just keeps on giving. All right, after the break, moments from our second most talked about topic this year, South Memphis versus billionaire Elon Musk. That's next.